Sit down, you young whippersnapper. I'm about to tell you a story. A story with Yu-Gi-Oh! In its heydays, at its height. Back when internet used to screech at you when you logged in. And when your mom would pick up the phone and tell you to get off, because she had to make an important call. Oh, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was so amazing back then. And I'm going to take you through this journey. This journey of awesome monsters and magical card effects and so many other great things. Just like how it began, Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2002 is a mystery to most, but not to some. For a time reference, if you turned old enough to drink in America this year, you were 3 when this card game came out. Possibly much younger depending on what country you're in. So allow me, a Yu-Gi boomer, to take you through this journey of a card game we love. But first, a small backstory. What? You didn't know? I'm Boomer Cali still, but I'm young. The young Boomer Cali. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a lot different back in the day. I'm talking about before it was even licensed by Konami. Some enthusiasts may remember, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Was actually licensed by Bandai. What? Bandai? You mean Pac-Man, Taken, Dragon Ball Z, merged with Sega, could have had Yu-Gi in Power Stone Bandai? Yes, that Bandai. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Was way different during that time. In 1996, a manga series named Yu-Gi-Oh! By Kazuki Takahashi was serialized in Shueisha's weekly Shonen Jump. And during that time, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was booming. It was so well received that the manga actually got an anime adaptation by Toei Animation from April 4th, 1998 to October of 1998. Known as Season 0 by many fans, this version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was way different. I mean, for a decent portion of the anime, there were no card games involved. Just Yugi killing people for stealing watches and stuff. You know, the usual. Now there's so much more to go over with Yu-Gi-Oh!'s rich history, and I can go over so many more aspects of the game. And if that's something that you want to see, then let me know. But this is a Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta timeline. Bandai was the first licensee of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card games, and the cards looked a lot different, and so was the game. I mean, look at these cards. The art was low-key amazing, but we can appreciate how vastly different it was, especially when it came to the rules. Contrary to popular belief, the game actually does have rules. A lot of them are written on the cards, and the game is very similar to what the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was. Remember when Joey used Time Wizard as a spell card? Or where Yugi used Monster Reborn as a trap card? Well, it's actually very close to how the Bandai version was. It wasn't as complicated. The rules are as follows. Rule number 1. Both players must use the same number of cards as their decks. Rule number 2. Draw 5 cards from your deck to your hand. Rule number 3. Select 1 monster card from your hand and play it to start a battle. Rule number 4. To determine the result of the battle, compare the attack of your attacking monster with the defense of the attacked monster. Rule number 5. If your monster's attack is higher, your opponent's monster is destroyed. Rule number 6. Even if you destroy the opponent's monster, if the defense of your monster is lower than the attack of your opponent's monster, your monster is also destroyed. Rule number 7. When the battle ends, draw 1 card from your deck, and then you can end your turn. Rule number 8. Each turn will continue like this until both players' decks are empty. Rule number 9. Each player counts the total level of stars of all monsters that were destroyed. The player with the highest amount is declared the winner. Rule number 10. If you have a spell, trap, or equip cards in your hand, you can put them in play face down. Rule number 11. You can activate face down spell, trap, or equip cards at any time during a battle. Rule number 12. When the effect of a spell, trap, or equip card is used, it is discarded. Rule number 13. When a player's deck is empty, the duel will continue until the other player's deck is empty. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of information on how Yu-Gi-Oh! Bandai was played and its meta in particular, but those are the rules of Bandai, and you can still find some of the most iconic cards to this day. You could say it was a completely crazy time for Yu-Gi-Oh! And I wonder, what would have been like if we still had those rules to this day? Shortly after, in 1999, Konami launched the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game in Japan, and then in March of 2002, because of the game's card success, it was released in North America with awesome results. I remember the very first time I seen Yu-Gi-Oh on Cartoon Network. Kaiba had just ripped up Grandpa's Blue Eyes White Dragon, and then shortly after, Hitatsumi Giant was destroyed by Celtic Guardian. I was glued to the screen attempting to draw every single miraculous monster in sight. Shortly after, I went to school to find classmates having real Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Nani? It was a wrap from there. My Transformers toys and my Pokemon cards thrown to the wayside as my journey of Yu-Gi-Oh began. The 2002 Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon Yu-Gi-Oh format is actually a lot more complicated than what some people give it credit. It has a unique feel where monsters just aren't outright strong. In fact, the strongest monster in the card game without tribute is 1550 attack, while the highest defense non-tribute monster being 2000 defense. This gave duelists some obstacles that they had to navigate, especially with cards being completely unlimited. From March 8th, 2002 through May 1st, you could play up to 3 copies of whatever you like. This caused a few situations. On March 8th in North America, Konami released one of the most iconic sets of all time in The Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon. If you have a sealed first edition English booster box of the set, that could fetch you close to $40,000. Now, if somebody can explain to me why save money in banks when we can get a markup like this, I feel like I've wasted all my money my entire life. This set had a whopping 126 cards, with 2 being secret rares, 10 being ultras, 10 super rares, 22 rares, and 82 commons. And to make you Zoomers cry for your mama, there was no guarantee of a super rare pack, but the ratios were displayed on the side of the box. More on that later. The Legend of Blue Eyes marked the beginning of an era with cards like Raigeki, Dark Hole, Pot of Greed, and Monster Reborn being the 4 horsemen of Yu-Gi-Oh! Some of the most noticeable and powerful cards that you have ever seen, possibly of all time. There are actually a ton of cards that go completely unnoticed to a player that didn't experience the format. Take for example, Trap Hole was a true game wrecker. It can destroy any monster summoned over 1,000 attack. And in a format where your normal summon meant so much, a well-timed Trap Hole would be devastating. There's also Man-Eater Bug, another huge monster killer. All it requires you to do is set it. Your opponent unsuspectingly summons their strongest monster, attacking into your face-down card, and Man-Eater Bug demolishes the card within seconds. Now, I know I talked about the 4 apocalypse of Yu-Gi-Oh cards inside of Legend of Blue Eyes, but there actually could be a 5th member, as Swords of Revealing Light, when left completely unchecked, is devastating. With cards like Mystical Space Typhoon and Heavy Storm being non-existent, this card was disgustingly rude. Imagine enjoying your day pummeling your opponent's monsters, and then they activate a Sword of Revealing Light. That's fine. You wait patiently for 3 turns, building up some of your best monsters, only for your opponent to activate another copy of Swords of Revealing Light. You wait an additional 3 turns, and then your opponent activates their 3rd Swords of Revealing Light, meaning that you waited 9 turns of just drawing cards, summoning monsters, and not necessarily doing anything with them. And to make matters worse, the only check to a card like Swords of Revealing Light was a monster named Armed Ninja, a card that was virtually useless in almost any other situation, as both equipped spells and field spell cards were never used. Fissure was absolutely phenomenal, especially if your opponent has their only strong face-up monster on the field, and Stop Defense forces monsters like Giant Soldier of Stone to go on the offensive, so you don't have to tribute your own monsters to summon something possibly bigger than it. Ironically, Stop Defense also got rid of the threat of Man-Eater Bug if you didn't have a monster on the field, or it forced them to use it when they may not have wanted to. Blue Eyes White Dragon was the most sought after card not only because it was iconic, but he was single-handedly the strongest monster in the entire game and did answer a lot of problems. To put it into context, there wasn't a single monster that required 1 tribute that could attack over Giant Soldier of Stone, but monsters like Blue Eyes White Dragon, Red Eyes Black Dragon, Dark Magician, and Gaia the Fierce Knight were the only monsters that could naturally attack over monsters like Giant Soldier of Stone. But among all of these monsters that required 2 tributes, Blue Eyes White Dragon was not only the strongest, he was psychological warfare when you summoned him, as even though there were plenty of cards to beat it, and often it wasn't the correct card to play, it's Blue Eyes White Dragon from the Legend of Blue Eyes set. This card carried so much clout, you could literally fly on it. It's the flying Nimbus for Yu-Gi-Oh! The same thing could be said about Exodia, the Forbidden One, because while a person can get lucky and pull a Blue Eyes White Dragon, Mama would have to max out the entire credit card to buy you enough booster boxes to get a set of the almighty Exodia. There's no amount of chores you could do to get her to do that. Having just one piece of the legendary Exodia felt rare. Having all 5 pieces, you were literally Yugimoto in the anime. Games with just the set of a Legend of Blue Eyes were fairly clunky. Giant Soldier of Stone was easily the best monster based on his bulky defense and sizable attack. Allows you to stall for a bigger tribute monster like First Ed Blue Eyes White Dragon, Dark Magician, Red Eyes, or Gaia the Fierce Knight. Skull Red Bird and Yorubi were your big beater monsters, coming in at 1550 attack and 1500 respectively. These were the strongest monsters in the game, mainly because the filled spell cards and equipped spell cards were fairly useless. Monsters like Hane and Man-Eater Bug kept the bigger monsters that required tribute at bay. It actually made all of the 1 tribute monsters completely useless, as tributing a monster like Giant Soldier of Stone for Doma the Angel of Silence would be able to get over a Skull Red Bird, but in turn, you'd have to tribute another monster after it was bounced with Hane or would lose it to the graveyard for a Man-Eater Bug. Now, the irony about the Legend of Blue Eyes set is that while we can look back and say, man, we 100% should have bought a booster set, the average parents were extremely reluctant to spend so much money on Yu-Gi-Oh cards for their children. I mean, think about it. Adjusted for inflation, the Legend of Blue Eyes set cost about $51 per box. That's Jay-Z's Black Album, System of a Down's Toxicity album, their layaway payment to Kmart, and their monthly Blockbuster membership. Just wasn't happening. This actually made a huge disparity on this Yu-Gi-Oh card game, as the players with money can pretty much pay to win playing their 3 copies of Pot of Greed, Monster Reborn, Raigeki, Dark Hole, Swords of Revealing Light, and if they wanted to, they can stunt with Blue Eyes White Dragon, or if mommy and daddy's pockets were big enough, you could play Exodia in as many copies as you wanted to. Getting yourself 40 actual cards to play was incredibly hard to do. Most players would just play with the small sample size that they have, or even better, we'd play by the dual monster rules, completely disregarding all of the official rules. But the fact still remains, since players couldn't get full decks and some of the best cards were incredibly scarce, it was a card game that was seen, but not necessarily played. But all of that changed on March 28th. Dark Magician. Dark Magician.